I'm not gonna pretend like I grew up with this console. Like most people my age, I had way too much freedom on the internet and spent my adolescence watching multiple nerds talk about ancient video games and how they made them feel bad. As you can see, exposure to this content was like a room full of banana peels, slipping me deeper into the twisted world of video games and how to talk about them. But even without the nostalgia, there's a lot to be learned here. So many of the staple series we enjoy today kickstarted on this gray rectangle, and it would be a shame to let these first steps lay dormant in the cultural attic. So let's learn through juxtaposition, a contrast between the very best and worst this era of entertainment has to offer. You may be wondering how I'll find these two extremes without any first-hand knowledge, but that's easy. I'll just nab it from somewhere else. Shout out to H Bombergun. When I look through the best NES games, one single title rises to the top. It's a little dicier on the bottom end, but I think I have a perfect contender. So with all that settled, we're going to explore what makes Super Mario Bros. 3 so great and talk about a game so bad that when you look it up on YouTube, the first result you get is a link to a hotline. That hotline. Let's begin. The only fair way to do this will be to break each game into the sum of its parts. For my money, that would be introduction, look, feel, sound, and difficulty. Normally, I would consider things like story and characters, but when we're talking about the NES, I figure we should curb some of that enthusiasm. Mario 3 starts off masterfully, peeling the curtain back to introduce us to all the gameplay it has in store. It always throws me off that there's no music here. I get that this allows you to have the game running while you want to play it if it's in the background or whatever, but it never fails to give me a twinge of worry that my speakers are busted. But that worry is soon dismayed as we press play. The theatricality flows into the gameplay, platforms with support beams and backgrounds casting silhouettes. There's more variety in the first 3 levels of this game than the entirety of the original Mario Brothers, and they never let their foot off the gas. I want you to keep this introduction in mind. We're about to step into some new levels of low. And while we're peeling back curtains, let's reveal the bad title of the day. Originally, I was going to talk about this game. But as it turns out, Cheetahman 2 was never officially licensed by Nintendo, disqualifying it from the competition. Thank you, God! So instead, today we're going to talk about Deadly Towers, a game that was so bad it couldn't even get the gold medal in the worst game competition. Oddly enough, this title has gone through a recent renaissance. People from my generation really love to take generally hated things and decide that they're misunderstood and actually really great, a phenomenon I like to call the millennial reprise. Rest assured, dear viewer, that's not going to happen today. Deadly Towers starts with an unbelievable amount of backstory, scrolling at a speed just fast enough that it makes it utterly pointless to read it through. And then they just plop you into the game. Don't let this empty screen lead you astray. The only door you can go through is packed with all sorts of nonsense. No information, no easing into the mechanics, just an ecosystem of worms and bats, evil clouds, and jittery imps sandwiched between invincible blobs. Combining the initial text dump with this mishmash of content somehow makes for the first step of this game both over-informed and completely inexplicable. But don't worry, it gets worse. Now, Mario 3's initial momentum never takes so much as a hit. These worlds tend to keep to one theme: grasslands and deserts, water and lava, yada and yada. It's in that box of tradition that they open the structure to innovation. Weaving your way towards the mid-game leads to a gigantic world, a maze of pipes. You can even leave one zone through a castle and wind up halfway in Cloud City. Now, it's no secret that the NES is limited when it comes to everything, but in the right hands, that restriction makes for a breeding ground of creativity. The sand dunes double as castle spires. They just need 3 colors to convey a battalion of tanks, all the way down to tiny flourishes like flowers flowing to the rhythm of the beat. There's this curious spark of originality that follows Mario games like a friendly ghost. Some incomparable appeal that we all started to realize was in this very game. It makes for a world that's approachable and interesting. Unlike your high school crush, let me tell you something. On the other end of the spectrum, Deadly Towers plays with graphics in a way I can only describe as complicated. Each screen is dedicated to one sole color that seems to flip-flop at random. We're talking Pearson yellow, washed gray, muted blues, none of which ever match the make of the monsters within. But I don't blame them for that, as the creatures featured are bizarre. You got your standard knights and bats, but then you start seeing lizards and Draculas, cavemen, and those worms from Elden Ring. It feels like a prank. When it comes to you and all those bad dudes, you take up a good chunk of screen real estate, leading to weird collisions where you start taking damage the second you pop on screen, and I'm talking 0 to death with 0 input. And the aesthetics are just the beginning of what really makes this game, but trust me when I say that things are not getting better. As much as I want to come out of the gate and say Mario 3 is a great feeling platformer, I just don't think great is the word for it. With the benefit of hindsight, the lack of interesting input makes for an archaic experience, one where left, right, and up are the only real influences you have. But in that vein, I could not imagine a game like this to feel any better than it does, especially when you consider how often they pump up the power-ups. Outside of the usual mushrooms and fire flowers, they slammed down a handful of bangers. Tanuki suit, frog flippers, Tanuki suit with statue powers. More than the abilities these powers grant, it's the way that they curtail the experience to be tackled in multiple ways. Like one of the good Sonic games, each level has multiple ways to be accomplished. When the world rewards you for safely keeping your ability, it feels incredible. And they strike a perfect balance, never handing out these upgrades like candy while never making you starve for help. It's all so effortless. The goal almost always makes sense and leads to this great feeling of not only gliding through opposition, but soaring over it. As for Deadly Towers, I think I've found the best way to accurately nail that feeling. Imagine we lived in an alternate timeline where Dark Souls wasn't secretly a masterpiece. Imagine if your first impression of that game turned out to be all there was to discover. You open the door, you get mushed into the dirt, and no amount of squirming will ever make you feel more confident in your abilities. You may get a laser sword, but following the time-tested tradition of limiting your projectiles to 1 per screen, we get into the thick of what we call in the gaming industry a double whammy. You either miss, leaving you out in the open without any way to do anything, or you get as close to your enemy as possible, then easily stunlock them and transform the combat into a waiting game. Neither of these situations feel good, making your entire ability to meaningfully interact with the world a frustrating mess. Although if I'm being real, the baseline is not the ceiling. Once you actually get into the titular towers, you can stumble onto merchants, granting you the protection you so desperately need. I mean, check out the music they use for the occasion. Yeah, we can talk about the music. Now be honest with me, did you really need me to tell you about the tunes in Mario? This is Koji Kondo at his prime, cooking up beats that echo into the world we play in today. But you know me, I'm happy to dip into a few highlights. The minigame theme always stops me dead in my tracks. In a world filled with so many complex compositions, it's amazing to see how these 7 ascending notes just take the cake as far as bonus music goes. There are so many airship levels in this game, so it's a good thing that the airship music goes hard as hell. It wouldn't have been easy to emulate a timpani, but it certainly paid off. World 3 has a decent theme until you notice it's straight up the same key and measure as the fairy fountain theme. Apparently, these were both inspired by this absolute jam. If you like Nintendo-ass Nintendo music, make sure to check out the stuff that influenced Kondo, especially Plantasia. Nothing else will compare. It's important to know that these songs don't just serve as catchy tunes to help you enjoy the game. They're intertwined with the worlds you wander. So much of the tone, feel, and takeaway from this game comes down to how brilliantly the music reflects any given level. It is the glue that binds the experience together, taking it from great to legendary. On the flip side, if you dare to take on the Deadly Towers, you need to be ready for the musical equivalent of psychological torture. When you start, you get one song, immediately changing once you walk through the first door. Every subsequent door you open will start this song again, this awful, chirpy, medieval tune that burrows deep into your skull, perfectly pairing with the nonsense you face in every corridor. There's technically a different theme for each tower, but it's just a minor change to the same song, infinitely looping for the entire experience. The same way that music lifts Mario 3, Deadly Towers uses audio to drive the nail into the coffin. And if we're gonna be talking about death, let's wrap this up with the difficulty discussion. There's no easy way to nail down difficulty in Mario. Around here, knowledge is power. The more experience you have with this game, the easier it's gonna go. To the point where you only need to play 4 levels to get to the last zone. But beyond that, any platformer worth its salt is going to reward confidence, placing obstacles in such a way that you can make it straight through if you don't hesitate. This is where you find the sweet spot, a sprawling landscape of manageable challenge that never overstays its welcome, introducing new landscapes that tangle within new situations, leaving you with that tantalizing feeling that you just need to play one more level. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's ridiculous moments, some of which I can't even begin to understand why they're in the game, but these situations are few and far between, making more of an interesting footnote than a genuine concern. But I know you. You want to talk about genuine concerns, and I can do that. You ever buy a game, bring it home, and just a few minutes in, you realize it's bad? There's that sinking feeling, especially when you were too young to buy your own games. This might be the only new entertainment you'll have for a while, and you simply messed up. Despite any protest or wishing away, this game is now a part of your life. This is what Deadly Towers feels like, a bad blockbuster rental that ruins your weekend, a choice made off of box art alone, a choice that you might be paying for until your next birthday. Beyond the impenetrable opening, there is no semblance of direction, coordination, or game sense. Endless corridors of differing colors with randomized enemies tossing unfair attacks with janky splatters of pits to fall in. This is without a doubt 100% digital vomit. If you have the chance to either play Mario 3 or this awful game, I'd say you should play Deadly Towers. You may be wondering why I think that after all the negative coverage, but the answer is simple. You've got it too good. Let's keep it real here, folks. You've played Mario 3, and if you haven't, then you know you easily can. This, as well as hundreds, if not thousands, of excellent games are right at your fingertips, ready for you to tap into whenever you decide to dust off the backlog. I'm a firm believer that rainy days make the flowers bloom. You never appreciate the game of the year without a few terrible titles to show you how stark the difference is. If art's main purpose is the effort to provoke you on some emotional level, then these two games are equally valid. I think you should open yourself to more garbage. Some of my favorite games are terrible, and I still have fond memories of them. Some games are so bad that they flip around to being good, and Deadly Towers... I take it back. Play Mario 3.
Okay.
Hey, Happy New Year! Specifically to Booger Boss, Brumna, Lee, Post Mesmeric, Seth Peacock, Thomas, and Vindalin for their support on Patreon. If you want to start off the new year by helping supporting me make dumb videos, consider supporting on Patreon, or becoming a member on YouTube, or just joining the Discord. That one's free. I hope you enjoyed this shorter video while I work on my big, huge, gigantic project. I'm gonna have a couple of these shorter videos while I get that going. Outside of that, I hope you have a fantastic year, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.